Hey guys, and welcome to a Watchmen Tower Babble breakdown. My name is Dan D'Souza. I'm joined by Jeremy Kozier.
Hello.
We're here today to break down episode 3 of HBO's Watchmen series. She was killed by space junk. What we do here on the show, we try to look at it as a show exclusively. There will be some color and context from the comics, obviously, and a little bit from Zack Snyder's movie, but we try to focus on it, exploring it just as a show and, the current mythology of Watchmen rather than going too deep into the backstory. That being said, it's kind of avoidable at times. So there will be spoilers all the way through for Watchmen, the comic series, as well as the movie, which is essentially the same thing.
Except for the end.
Except for some very huge details towards the end. Just real quick before we get started, I need to plug all of our social media. Follow us on Twitter at Tower Babblecast, Facebook.com/Tower Babblecast. Check out our Patreon page, Patreon.com/Tower Babblecast. What we do once a month is a movie club for our Patreon patrons. We just recently watched Looper as a group. That was our October movie. November is going to be Mystic River. Essentially, what we're doing is recording us, preamble before the movie, watch the movie, and then quickly immediately react to the movie. So please join us for that. They've been a lot of fun so far. There's been some good feedback from the patrons, I should say. With that being said, Jeremy, real quick impressions of the episode as a whole.
I love this episode. Definitely
Really?
a departure from the first two, right? This episode obviously dealing closer with the main characters of the original Watchmen source material, giving us more context with what actually happened after Ozymandias, dropped the squid monster on the city.
Right.
So I was just really into it for that, like in the beginning, just being with these familiar characters and finding out what happened to them, where they ended up. And it's refreshing, even though I'm really into where the first episodes are going with the new characters and the new setting. I just really dug how we're kind of diving into that old Watchmen feel.
Yeah, I mean, so this was very much a Laurie Blake episode, and she is definitely going as Blake, not Juspeczyk or,
Right.
or however you pronounce that. So she's embraced her persona as the comedian's daughter.
And played by Jean Smart, who I just think does an incredible job here. I thought she was brilliant.
She's very imposing. She's very assertive. She definitely controls the episode on her. It's
100%, yeah.
all on her.
It's Silk Spectre, like completely evolved, with all that history behind her, all the events that happened, and it's made her into something completely different and cynical, which is basically the moniker of the comedian, her dad.
Yeah, so like much like the comedian, she's seen the world. She's seen everything the world has to offer. She's seen all sides of the superhero mythos, the people both with their masks on and behind the masks. So the sort of the illusion and the romance is gone for her at this point.
And she's on the other side of things, heading up a task force called the Vigilante Task Force, which is pretty crazy. I mean, obviously she can use those skills because she used to be a vigilante. So
yeah, she knows the ins and the outs, and
I guess it's kind of clear here that she struck a deal with the government potentially to use her skills to do this instead of going to jail, because we learn of other characters and where they end up, right?
yeah, again, it's very similar to the comedian who ended up taking government contracts, right?
Yeah,
He
that's true.
ended up working with the government after the Keene Act was passed, after masks were outlawed, and him and Dr. Manhattan were the only two to remain legally active and sanctioned.
Right. And then here we learn that John Keene's son, Joe Keene, running for president.
Yeah, that's confirmed now.
Has a relationship with Laurie and tasks her with uncovering the truth or just investigating Crawford's death, because he brought forth the new act for
Tulsa.
For Tulsa, yeah.
Yeah, and that's important. Okay, we'll jump into the episode right away, I guess. But that's important. That was something that I wasn't aware of. That this concept that the police wear masks, that there are certain detectives that are masked Avengers, essentially, that's limited to Tulsa at this point, to Oklahoma at least.
Because those attacks, the White Knight,
yeah,
everybody quit except for a few, right? Like Crawford, and Abar. So in order for them to continue and to get new people hired up, they had to do something, and this was
fair enough.
So if this war breaks out and more people die, then Keene can kiss the presidency goodbye, basically.
Right, because his plan didn't work out. Okay, so let's jump in. This episode, much like the others, is sort of bookended. There's a theme, a running theme to the episode. In the first episode, the bookend was the sheriff's badge. In the second one, it was those leaflets that the Nazis were distributing.
Right.
And in this one, it's Laurie talking to Manhattan, or
Right.
ostensibly trying to talk to Dr. Manhattan.
Yeah,
on
so
Mars.
it breaks the structure for that the first 2 episodes shared, and it is framed through this joke where we basically see her contacting Dr. Manhattan, but we later learn that anybody can kind of come up here and utilize this. I think it's called the Blue Booth Network by I guess a company we learned called True.
that bought Vite Industries.
Right. So that's going to be a major player. There's also this crazy clock tower that is
Right.
a monument over there.
Yeah, it's so crazy how much of this stuff is around Tulsa, which
Mhm.
Tulsa had nothing to do with the original story of Watchmen.
Right.
It's just where this takes place now, and it makes sense for the context, like especially the racial context of that area,
Mhm.
and the modernization of that. But it has nothing to do with the source material. It's kind of odd.
Right.
With that being said, though, it starts off with the first. It's sort of a series of jokes that in the end turns out to be one long joke.
Right. So she starts off with a joke about a bricklayer. You could say that this is comparing the bricklayer to the comedian because she says a guy is a bricklayer, has a daughter, wants to pass on all of his skills. And she kind of pretends, I guess, we learn later that she kind of messes this joke up. And it ends with saying that the daughter throws a brick into the air.
Right.
I mean, we come back to that later. But she starts off the new joke about 3 heroes at the pearly gates of heaven, I guess, to see God and his judgment will be
To
laid
find out
upon
whether or
them.
not they're
Yeah.
allowed in, essentially meeting St. Peter.
Right. And those jokes are in reference to Night Owl first up, then Ozymandias, then Dr. Manhattan.
Right.
And they basically all get sent to hell, but they plead their case, right? What they did with their skills. Night Owl said, he built the cool technology stuff, the ship, his suits, his gadgets, saved people, but he didn't. God asked him, how many people did you kill? He says none, and God sentenced him to hell because he's too soft.
Yeah, I guess that's how that works.
Yeah. And then I guess we can just go
Sort
through
of
these
non-traditional.
jokes. Then Ozymandias is next. Obviously, his skill set is his smarts. God asked him how many lives did he kill, and
Couple million.
yeah, or more, and basically calls him a monster. Snaps his fingers. He goes to hell. Next up is Dr. Manhattan, who's also basically God himself. This one's a cool one because just how it ends. He basically says he fell in love with a girl. He won a war. Fell in love with another girl.
Right.
What else?
Walked across the surface of the sun.
Yes, yeah.
He was sort of the witness to everything that Vite did. I don't know if they explicitly said that, but essentially God sentences him to hell as well. And he says something along the lines of, I knew you would say that. God says, how did you know? And he says, because I'm already there.
Right. Very cool ending to that.
Very
part of
cool.
the joke.
It's one of those things that this is the hardest thing to understand about Dr. Manhattan is that he experiences time simultaneously, past, present, future. So a version of him is experiencing stuff that we would perceive as the future version of him experiencing.
Mhm.
But it's really hard to understand and really hard to explain, turns out.
Right. And then I guess maybe we'll visit the final part of the joke later on.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so. But that's a cool way for them to establish some context. Again, I think most people are operating under the assumption that the average viewer is at least familiar with the source material in whatever capacity. Yet maybe they read it when they were much younger. Maybe they read it recently. Who knows? Maybe they've only seen the movie.
Mhm.
But if there are people out there in the general audience that haven't familiarized themselves with Watchmen, this is a way to understand some of the characters, specifically Manhattan and Vite, because
Yeah.
Dryberg, we've learned, is likely not in the show,
Mhm.
although he's referenced in this episode.
And we get an introduction to Laurie's character. We don't know if she's Laurie yet, right? Like from the
Right.
get-go.
Right.
And it's this cool scenario where it's a sting operation to catch vigilantes in the act. Pretty clever. What do you think of that scene?
Yeah, so this is part of that, what I was saying earlier, how I wasn't aware that the police force being masked wasn't a nationwide thing.
Okay.
So in basically any other city in the country, there are still vigilantes, and it's outlawed. And so there's an FBI task force that's assigned with capturing them. This is all new. This is not part of Watchmen. to date. Thought it was really cool. It's like having watched the trailers, we those of us who did knew that she was Laurie Blake, so that kind of
they set that up for
tipped
sure.
it off, and we knew that she was FBI. But it was still a really cool scene itself.
What was the vigilante's name? Do you remember? I think it was Shadow, Mr. Shadow. I think she refers to him as.
There were two names, and that was it. Was the second one. The first one was Revenger, I think.
Yeah. And I guess he tries to escape, and she shoots him like how many times? Like 4 times.
She pops him a couple times in the back, and they make a joke about it. Not even a joke about it. They make one of her agents calls her out, like, "How did you know his armor would stop that?" And
she just keeps walking. And
she just keeps walking.
Close up on the face, you know that she didn't care really.
Yeah.
Can I chime in here for a second?
Oh, hello.
Hey, it says, by the way, my name is Julian Misha. I'm helping produce the show. I've been working with these guys for a long time. If you're not familiar with everything else we do at towerbabble.com. So towerbabble.ca, actually, not .com. Anyway,
pick your poison.
That line is just straight up from MacGruber.
No, it's not.
Yeah, it is. It's straight up from MacGruber.
That's what you wanted to interject for.
Yeah, I wanted to get it in sooner than later, so I didn't jump in with something more serious later. Because I have something more serious coming up later. But yeah,
God.
it's the MacGruber joke. Yeah. How'd you know I was wearing a vest? Anyway.
Okay. Well,
continue.
I'm not sure if everybody has seen MacGruber.
It's amazing.
It's a funny movie. I doubt that's where they got the line from. Just knowing how I think these things work, I doubt that they were ripping that off or even.
Well, I mean, it's a pretty common line, but still, that's what it made me think.
And then that scene ends with her arresting the vigilante who's obviously wounded and handcuffs him to the stretcher. Everyone's booing. He's a hero, and he says he's not a hero. He's a fucking joke. So
right.
Another callback to Comedienne.
It's clear, and it becomes much more clear throughout the episode because this episode really is a deep dive into Laurie and her psyche,
and to the rest of the Watchmen, really.
Yeah, she's really she's hung up on superheroes in a couple different ways,
right?
Or on vigilantes, whatever you want to call them. So she has sort of a love-hate thing where she outwardly really is trying to prevent them from operating and trying to stop them, essentially, but inwardly she still has sort of fetishes for that kind of stuff.
Fetishes, okay, and then
this becomes clear later.
Yeah, well, right away, I guess. So then we see her at home after, and we learn that she has a pet owl named Who. She has this briefcase. All we see in this scene, though, is that it's glowing blue, and she's kind of looking at it. We learn later on what it is. Do you want to talk about what's in that briefcase now?
it's a giant blue cock.
Callbacks to Night Owl with the pet owl and Dr. Manhattan, obviously both having relationships with her.
She also has a poster of herself.
Well, she has this, like, I can't remember what the art style is
stylized. It's that I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
it's like old fashioned.
No, there's
modern art.
There's a specific artist that created this in real life. He did it with cats. It's a bunch of different versions of cats with different like color palettes. Essentially, I don't.
Oh yeah, and that's when we get the reveal, right? That it is actually Silk Spectre.
Yeah, because they have it framed in such a way that is, I think it's Rorschach, Night Owl, and Comedienne, maybe, or Manhattan, and then
Manhattan, Comedienne, Doctor, and Night Owl.
Okay, and then the fourth person in that the quadrant that's blocked by your head is actually Silk Spectre.
Right.
If you hadn't put the pieces together by now.
And the second Silk Spectre, her mother, Laurie Jupiter, the original Silk Spectre, part of the Minutemen.
Right.
We learn in that book, obviously, that Comedienne raped her one night, and that is
he tried to rape her one night, and then later on in their lives, they got together and had consensual sex, and that's what begot Laurie.
Right.
It's complicated.
Yeah. So then in this scene, she gets a visit from Joe Keene, and this is when we kind of learn what he's up to, what he wants, and him sending her to investigate Judd Crawford's death.
Right.
And in return, we learn that if he helps her do this, he will set free the owl from the cage.
Yeah.
So, alluding to Dan Dryberg is still in jail.
So what we're inferring from this is that he was locked up for having violated the Keene Act. Right. So after the events of Watchmen, the book, the two of them decide that they're going to go adventuring again. She wants to become the Comedienne. Right. So she designs a new costume with a leather mask, very similar to the Comedienne's second costume. And presumably Dryberg has either another Night Owl or some other alias and is captured. So she struck a deal and he wasn't able to. I'm not sure what the reasoning behind that is, but it's it's made clear here that he's locked up right now.
Yeah.
And it's a little on the nose. Like she has a pet owl in a cage, and he says, "Let the owl out of the cage." And, I mean, they kind of wrote that joke, not even joke. They wrote that reference in backwards, I think.
Yeah. And then we learn the DOPA Act is what it's called. The Defensive Police Act is what Joe
Right.
Keene put into place. So again, he's just scared that this war is going to result in more deaths, which means his DOPA Act didn't do anything, which means he won't get presidency. And then I guess we go to the detective precinct.
Right.
Where...
No. Before that, we do the FBI stuff, right? Where she like says no to the rest of the team and just goes with that kid.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's where she is, right?
Okay, that FBI headquarters, yeah.
Yeah. And here we get kind of a recap, right, of the White Knight and all the rules that you basically, right, we were clarified better here.
Right.
And she's going to lead the task force with a team, but she opts to go on her own. She's not allowed to. She decides to take this guy named Petey, who we're introduced, he's doing the slides, and he kind of, what does he do? He puts Rorschach's journal in there.
It looks like a page from Rorschach's journal. I don't think it's the first page. But he also showed a slide of what I would assume has become the 7th Cavalry's manifesto, so to speak. Like it's a version of Rorschach's journal that they've adopted and used for their own purposes. So that's the sort of the impulse for them, and that's the inspiration for the 7th Cavalry. Clearly, if you couldn't tell by the masks.
Yeah. And then Laurie picks him because she sees that he has interest or knowledge, and why not? If she's going to take anybody, take this kid, I guess.
Or that he'd be complacent and like not challenge her. Either way, it works. And you were saying, Jeremy, that Petey, Peteyopia,
not Peteyopia. It's Peteypedia, like Wikipedia. It's clearly named after this guy's character because of his background, his knowledge. He studied in university and wrote paper on the police brutality in '77, which resulted in the Keene Act. So he knows his history.
You guys want to know something else that we learned from Peteypedia?
Sure.
So, are you guys aware that in this version of 2019 America that there's no internet or very little limited access to the internet?
And and cell phones.
You know why? Multiple Peteypedia entries. It's such a stupid word. It's really dumb.
Yeah.
Reference a public panic over the widespread theory that humanity's own technology may have lured the giant squid to our dimension at the end of the original graphic novel. Fearful of inviting another, quote, dimensional incursion event, unquote, the U.S. government cracked down on all computer use. It even expanded the role of the FDA, transferring it to the Food, Drug, and Technology Administration and instituting the Tech Recall and Reintroduction Act in 1993. Only those technologies deemed safe by the FDTA are permitted for public use. Subsequent memo reveals that even radio broadcasts were restricted in New York for several years after the squid attack.
That's cool. That adds a lot of color to the world that I guess we hadn't really thought about it. We haven't seen cell phones really. No real references to the internet, but now it all makes sense.
The anti-technology hysteria was also fueled by the backlash against Dr. Manhattan, with Ozymandias having tricked the world into believing Manhattan's body emits carcinogenic radiation because so much tech in the Watchmen verse is derived from Manhattan's inventions and his own unique biology. The fears that these energy signatures may have crossed between dimensions and attracted the squid.
Right.
However, the anti-Manhattan backlash faded in 2019, and it seems computers are slowly being reintroduced in society. One of the memos on Peteypedia is aimed at briefing members of the FBI on new IBM computer systems and the concept of electronic mail, referred to as L-mail in this world.
L-mail.
Like EL.
Yeah.
There you go.
Very interesting. So, okay, what do we make of that then? Like, the idea that we know it's a hoax, but it was perpetrated by Vite, the attack, the squid attack, the transdimensional attack. So we know that that's fake. To what degree is the government complicit in that? Because they weren't in the comic at all, right? They weren't made aware. So either they're just as scared as everybody else, or they're using this as a fear tactic to control information. And I don't know where to land at this point, but it seems like some characters like the Keene guy, for example, they have ulterior motives and they have maybe a deeper understanding of what's going on in the world.
We just still don't know how Adrian really connects to any of these players, though. That's the thing. And we'll get to his scene, too.
Yeah, which is still very much removed from anything else that's going on.
Yeah, they just keep getting better and better. So yeah, Laurie heads down to Tulsa and is looking for Looking Glass first up, I guess. But she kind of has a run-in with Red Scare, and we learn of Pirate Jenny. Is the other masked detective. So here we just basically see her experience and her cockiness kind of shining through all these, I guess, rookies compared to her, right? With what she's seen.
She's got a ton of confidence because she has been there before, and like I think for her, seeing these essentially amateurs in masks is it's
funny to her,
embarrassing. Yeah, so she doesn't she's not intimidated by them at all and whatever they're trying to do, and because she already knows that life, she kind of has a leg up on them, I guess.
Yeah, and just basically embarrasses them.
Yeah, calls them out in front of in front of each other.
And then she does it to Looking Glass when she heads down to their underground facility or whatever, which is not like a comfortable place. There's, there's a bunch of people being interrogated. There's dogs barking nonstop. Just wouldn't be like your typical police.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of
place.
There's a lot of goose stepping essentially going on there, right? That's what it's made to look like, because they are going outside the letter of the law to do what they're doing. But anyways,
it's like designed to bring to mind thoughts of like detention camps and stuff like that. You're not normally seeing.
And these aren't really these aren't necessarily the good guys, especially their tactics.
It's designed to blur the line because we've been led to believe through these first few episodes that they are the good guys. They're the cops. We as society we're brought up to believe that the cops are the good guys, and then slowly that belief kind of erodes over time. But that's what they're doing here. They're blurring the line.
Yeah, and that is another form of social commentary. Very much a lot of what this show does is contemporary when it's commenting on racial situations or the situations with police brutality. Like that's part of that blurred line stuff. We don't need to talk about that. It's not necessarily a political show that we're running here, but that's something that this Watchmen is deliberately bringing to the forefront and challenging you to think about.
And then Laurie has fun with Looking Glass's pod, even calling it a racist detector.
A couple times,
which is a funny joke.
He's like, no, don't call it that.
He says that's an oversimplification.
Yeah, it's a cool scene. I swear to God, Looking Glass is still my favorite character ever made. Like, and he doesn't get the better.
He gets
for
a little
deconstructed.
Yeah, he gets a little deconstructed here. Laurie knowing his real name, and then again embarrassing him to a certain degree.
Yeah, just the little things like picking her teeth in his face. Like it's just
if your mask is a mirror, people are going to use it.
Right. So it's calling him out and kind of turning a mirror on him, so to speak.
Yeah. And then Laurie learns, or she wants to learn about the autopsy and why wasn't there the toxin test or whatever? What would you call it?
Yeah. I can't remember the term, but something along those lines. So what do we think she's looking for here?
I mean, just more details. That wasn't performed, right? It wasn't done, and she wants to know why. And because if it was done, right, what would they have found? They would have found the cocaine in his body, which is
some blow and like he'd been drinking.
Yeah.
But like I don't think that's enough to really like vilify him.
Either way,
if that's what she's looking for.
Yeah. Either way, it points her into Sister Knight's direction.
Right.
Who she says here she already knows it's Angela Barr, and Looking Glass, is kind of stunned a little bit. But yeah, that's who you're going to want to talk to next because she was there, or the first one on site, basically, other than Will, who Looking Glass doesn't even know about.
Well, no, but he wouldn't know that she was first on site either, right? Because she came
of them, I guess, like finding the body.
I think she was the first one technically to find it, but she was the last one on site when they were all there.
Oh yeah, that's true.
But Laurie is clearly looking for her, and knows enough about her. She's the FBI. So he doesn't like give her up necessarily, but he's like, yeah, you got it. Like you beat me.
Yeah. So there's also the conversation between her and Sister Knight where she references there's that line specifically where she says there was tire tracks at the thing. He says, she's like, oh, really? What kind of vehicle? Yeah. And she's like, oh, I didn't say vehicle. Like one of those like, I didn't tell you my first name kind of moments.
No, okay. So I mean that's later in the episode, but the way I read that is that. That's Angela being smart, because of course you would assume when someone says tire tracks, you would assume vehicle.
Right.
So for her to assume that means she has no knowledge of a wheelchair. So I think it was kind of smart of her to play it that way.
She did the best she could.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's a really cool detail that we weren't really thinking about that Laurie brought up.
Right. And it is something that like it kind of was at the back of my head last episode is like there would be tire tracks from Angela's vehicle as well as like the wheelchair. I didn't really think about the wheelchair because he's like a frail old man, doesn't weigh a lot, but
yeah. So Laurie meets Angela and her husband at Judd Crawford's funeral. And she's having a conversation with them, like knowing who her secret identity is, but Angela she has no idea who Laurie is, and she's still gonna play the whole thing that she's retired and all that stuff. And then we see a sequence. We hear a clock ticking sound again, so something's gonna happen here.
Yeah.
While Angela is doing the eulogy, and then she ends up singing a song. And then,
which is just like a very raw moment, and the entire time that she's singing, it's cutting back and forth to a member of the 7th Cavalry prepping a suicide vest.
Yeah,
and it's not clear where at first, but it becomes clear that it's in a mausoleum that's nearby.
Yes.
Were you thinking Terminator at all during this scene?
I was.
I knew you were. Yeah.
That's funny,
especially towards the end there. Yeah. Anyways, the goal there was to kidnap Senator Joe Keene was there. Calling him a race traitor and all this stuff. And then Laurie out of nowhere, decides to pop one and kills him, shoots him in the head, even though he said the vest is attached to his heart rate.
Yeah, later she said that she thought he was bluffing. It clearly he wasn't, but it also wasn't really well designed because it took a minute for it to go off.
Yeah, that was a little odd, but I guess he needed that to show Angela kind of do her thing. And it's a very cool sequence where she drags the body into the grave pit, and then also pushes the casket in there with Crawford inside of it. So saving everybody and also exploding the body. So do you think that was deliberate?
See, this is the thing. I think, well, yeah, it was deliberate in that she was trying to save everybody, and that 100%. She was just,
but the
all
second,
that kind of stuff.
The second part.
I think Laurie's going to think it was. And that's the conflict that we're being introduced to, because even later in the episode, it was very clear that Laurie and Angela are not necessarily on the same page or on the same side at this point. I'm sure towards the end of the series, they might, come into alignment.
Yeah, to me, since they mentioned the toxicology report and all that stuff and how it wasn't done, and Angela knowing what was in the system, I think it was deliberate just to dispose of the body completely so it couldn't be done.
You think okay.
I think she's hiding, still protecting Crawford, because she wants to stay on the case on her own at this point still, right? And then it's evident later on when Laurie, catches her coming out of the mausoleum thing.
Right, she's investigating on her own.
Yes, and then that's a really cool scene where Laurie just keeps going with her experience and what she knows, and then.
But it's clear that Angela is one of the few people that's not intimidated by Laurie. In that scene,
and we see that there, right? She kind of mocks her, like, "Oh yeah, I'm shaking in my boots."
Well, there's the best line in the entire episode is, what's the difference between a masked cop and a vigilante? And she's asking Angela that.
Yeah.
It's like
this is when they first meet.
Yeah,
so
and it's
after she's not admitting that she's Sister Night.
I mean, it's through she's going through a series of power moves with everyone she's meeting, right? Asserting her dominance, or as best she can, and like that one. It's clear to obviously to us that she's calling her out for being a liar, but showing that she knows that she has an idea of what this whole thing is like. This is her whole life, right? You can't bullshit a bullshitter kind of thing,
Yeah.
But I love that line. It's the best line in the whole episode, I think.
There's a lot of good lines in all these episodes.
I know.
And Laurie has a ton of them in this episode.
I know.
Yeah.
I didn't say it off the top, but like the framing of this episode with the joke, like cutting back and forth, is such a brilliant way to frame an episode, and such a, like you said, a change in pace.
Yeah.
But like so perfectly done.
Change in pace, change in structure, and giving us that context that's so closely attached to Watchmen, whereas the Tulsa stuff was attached to it, but slightly removed.
Yeah, this is very much a very good bridge episode.
Like this, like if you're a fan of Watchmen, like I just feel like this should be a very good episode.
Daniel didn't like it.
You know what? I tell you,
is it the change? It's probably the change of structure.
It was that. Yeah. I also only watched it once. I didn't have time to rewatch it, but it was also I was so into what was going on with Angela.
Yeah, me too.
And like finding
honestly
answers to that.
Yeah, I agree. At first, I was a little disappointed that we were shifting gears this much.
Yeah.
But with that character who's so closely attached to these other characters, like Night Owl, like Dr. Matt, like Ozymandias, who we finally get confirmation here, suited up confirmation too, which is a really cool
Right.
scene, but we'll get to that point. But I guess we should get there now because the Lord of the Manor, right? That who he was referred to as is officially Adrian Veidt, and
Right.
what happened in this scene here.
There's a lot going on, but yeah, we finally got the reveal that he's Veidt, that he's Ozymandias. I think, like for me personally, and I think for many people that were watching, it's like it wasn't much of a surprise. We all kind of assumed this.
I'm pretty sure Damon Lindelof, he said that they got ahead of this one and they put it out there that he is him, so that people weren't having those lost vibes of just being kind of lost with what they're trying to show.
That being said, when they revealed it, they literally used Mozart with the dun 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 to reveal it. It's like, well, it seems a bit much considering everyone knows
his whole scenario is a bit much. It's so over the top. He's just having fun the whole time, especially because look at his costume, like it's just so corny. But
he looks so stupid in it. He looks real dumb. But here's a question, and this is all my theories about the show revolve around this stuff. So I'm gonna toss some theories out at you guys. First one is what we see with Veidt happening concurrently with what we're seeing in Tulsa, or is it time jumping? We're seeing these like birthdays 1, 2, 3 in this one.
Yeah, there's 3 different.
Are they years apart? Are they
to answer your question, it's impossible to tell. I don't understand what the purpose of time jumping a year for each of those would be. Like, what does that add to Veidt's story? Because there's so much mystery around his story.
It would potentially catch you up to what was happening in Tulsa. It would be one of those things that would be best seen in a rewatch, or best experience in a rewatch, where you get more context after the revelation, right? It brings more context to what you've seen. Because right now, you're right, it exists. It's so separate. It's so weird.
But he's still old too, right? He's still lived a full 30 years since the incident.
So this is 31, 32, and 33 years.
And we learn more than ever about his scenario, right? We learn about this new character, the Game Warden, who could potentially just be another Mr. Phillips, right?
This comes my second theory. My theory is that his manor, like everything it's all on Mars.
Yeah.
It's all on Mars, and that the Game Warden is Manhattan.
Right. That's a very popular theory, because in the first episode we see Dr. Man on Mars creating a sort of manor castle-like looking thing.
The castle looks very similar to the castle that he's in.
And the experiment that he's performing here now is essentially making a spacesuit, and then we have a giant catapult.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's not going to get you into space, right? But it can get you out of the
this Mr. Phillips into space, and it didn't work. And he still wants to keep going with his plan, but the Game Warden is aware of what he's doing, writes him a letter.
Well, there is some kind of character, right? So it might not be Manhattan, but yeah.
And the letter states that he believes that Veidt is disobeying their agreement, I guess, for his captivity. I think they use the word captivity. So he's definitely in captivity by somebody.
So to work off that theory, if he is on Mars, and if Dr. Manhattan is not necessarily the warden, but the one who created this world for him, that Game Warden is a construct of Dr. Manhattan's that is issuing this warning. And it's not because he shot a buffalo with an arrow, but it's because he's been experimenting on other things and trying to escape, essentially, right?
He references him as like an adversary too at some point. I think in the letter he writes back to him.
What a fun moment in the episode that is when it's really cool. Dictating.
It's really cool, and if we're operating off of that assumption, this is the Lex Luthor and Superman dynamic, right? He's the smartest man in the world, or most capable man in the world, blah blah blah, and then a actual superhero comes along and he has to deal with that, and his ego can't handle it, so that he becomes an adversary for him.
And he says he'll suffer grave consequences if he doesn't obey to the agreement. So, but clearly he doesn't want to. He says he's going to attack at midnight or something.
He's going out hunting again at night. Yeah, and he puts on his suit.
That's when we get the amazing shot of the suit. I think it's fair to say it looks silly, but I think that's the point.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so like identical to what those moments in the comic where they have those headshots of him, and I really enjoyed it.
Well, it's like baggy and all the right baggy places, and like it looks like real in terms of a costume, but he's an old man. He's not going to fit it properly.
But I think and for him, again, there's a fetishization of that. Even in the comics, he stopped being Ozymandias a long time before the events of Watchmen, and it was just Adrian Veidt, just a private business enterprise of his own.
But
And
realistically, behind the scenes, he
behind the
was
scenes,
Ozymandias,
and at
yeah.
the very end, when he is executing his masterstroke, he does dress up again as Ozymandias. So he has a flair for the theatrical and the dramatic, and that's him putting on his real face, much like Rorschach.
Right.
Okay,
Building up to something.
You guys want to know some backstory on Adrian Veidt, according to Wikipedia?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So one Wikipedia entry, and by the way, I'm reading from an article from IGN here. One Wikipedia entry reveals the revelation that Veidt has faked his own death and gone into hiding, which is something we knew. According to a newspaper clipping, Veidt was officially declared dead by the FBI on September 9th, 2019, 8 years after the Bureau opened an investigation into the mysterious disappearance. We still don't know exactly why Veidt apparently chose to stage his own death, as it's made clear most of the world dismisses reports of Veidt's staging of the alien invasion as a wild rumor. So most people don't believe that.
Yeah, because why would you?
Yeah, right. There's a lot going into that. Obviously, this is why they ask you, do you believe that the squid is a government hoax or whatever?
He deliberately designed it that way for it to be completely unbelievable to trace him back to that.
Right, because no one would ever. It's just giant squid. It's the reason why it's not in the movie. We do learn more about Veidt's role in the public sphere in 1985. Following the events, it turns out his businesses went through a rough patch in the 80s and 90s as Veidt seemingly failed to anticipate the tech phobia that sprung from the DIE, which is the Dimensional Incursion event, and the ensuing economic upheaval. However, Veidt Enterprises eventually recovered.
Wait, sorry. Do they call it Die Day then?
They call it, I don't know, it's just called the Die incident in this particular thing. But Die Day does sound cooler. You're right. However, Veidt Enterprises eventually recovered, mainly by pivoting to genetically engineered food and pet cloning, businesses derived from technology he used to genetically engineer his cat, Bubastis. Wikipedia revealed that Veidt became more and more reclusive with time, inviting comparisons to legendary recluse Howard Hughes. Veidt's disappearance was only discovered in 2012 when a company called True Industries purchased Veidt Enterprises, and a group of executives traveled to his Antarctic home of Karnak to seek Veidt's approval. We know that Veidt is currently hiding out a remote British estate. I, again, don't know if that's true, carrying out some sort of eccentric plot, but the world at large, Adrian Veidt is dead and gone. We somehow doubt things will stay that way. So there you go.
Okay, here's a question for both of you. Jeremy, you brought up the PDPD thing. Yeah. Is this meant to be written in universe?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh yeah. 100%.
Yes. Absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
I'm not reading directly from Wikipedia, by the way. This is like pulled from Wikipedia, but yeah.
So officially HBO, all that stuff.
But the way that it ends. So the way I'm supposed to read that is this is that character PD writing to me if I lived in that universe.
Yes.
Not writing about.
Yes, and there's sometimes excerpts from like newspapers and stuff. Like here, let me show you.
So then that last line, I get it. It is very
like
much.
It's
like the comic. It's like
and Doomsday Clock also does it.
So that last line is that we doubt it'll stay that way. It means he knows that Veidt is faked his death.
No, again, I'm not reading directly from Wikipedia.
Oh, okay. So there was a quote within a quote there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm reading. This is like they're pulling information.
It's commentary on it, like much. Like
Gotcha.
But yeah, he's probably not going to stay that way. They're right though.
I know.
And there's a few Black Freighter references in this episode as well.
Yeah, the hotel.
The
motel that she's staying at is called
her
Black
and Peter's
Freighter.
staying at, and there's the flag logo.
Yeah.
Surrounding the estate. That
the skull
and bones. Yeah.
And then I guess Pirate Jenny a little bit.
I feel like there was one other one that felt so out of place.
Is Pirate Jenny specifically a character in Black Freighter?
No.
Or is it just like in reference to she's a pirate?
Yeah,
so
I would say so.
It probably is a deeper reference that I'm not aware of. I think Pirate Jenny kind of sounds familiar, but I'm at this point confusing it with Jenny of Old Stones. So I, I don't remember it off the top of my head, but there was another reference that felt out of place. Like the thing with the Black Freighter, it was always sort of like a metaphor, partially for Adrian Veidt losing his humanity, right, with the best of intentions, all that kind of stuff. But I think it was something that he said, referencing pirates, that felt weird to me. Anyways, we'll get back to that. Probably never.
There's mention of Russia creating their own intrinsic field generator.
Right.
So ostensibly creating another Dr. Manhattan.
They're trying to recreate the experiment. Yeah.
The Red Sun. If you're making allusions to Superman.
Dr. Moscow.
What's the name of the Russian project to create nuclear bombs? I'm sure there's one.
There
I'm
probably
sure,
is one, yeah.
It's probably not as cool as Manhattan Project, but still.
That's it for Veidt, though, right? Like, he's just
for sure.
stewing on his property or in his captivity.
There's not enough information. Like, it's just so
He's
abstract.
trying something.
And you're right, it's getting better every episode, but it's still so disconnected from everything. And it's
getting closer.
To Julian's point, it's going to look better in retrospect, I imagine.
100%, yeah.
So what's next?
I guess the final confrontation, Laurie and Angela, which we kind of talked about already. There's one cool bit in there where she talks about the secret compartment in the closet and references the Comedienne, which Rorschach found in the beginning comics. So I thought that was a cool parallel. And she never saw what was in the closet, so it was the KKK outfit was missing.
Yeah,
by the time Laurie got
Angela
there.
took it.
Yeah.
She took it and she threw it at Will. And I don't know what happened to it after that.
Mhm.
So Laurie finds an empty bust.
Yes. So she wants to know what was on that bust, and Angie's still not. She's still not ready to trust Laurie, I guess, yet.
Or anyone. Like, she
Or
still hasn't
anyone.
revealed anything about Will to her, to like Looking Glass or anybody.
Mm-hmm. And then we end with the final part of the joke. Yes, before that we learn about the dildo is revealed to be in the briefcase.
Well, that happened. That happened much earlier. I think you're missing a moment though, where she tells
We're missing many
Angela.
moments, but
Well, yeah, there's a specific moment where she says, like, in my experience, secret closet or like secret compartments in a closet with a bust don't like. And she talks about like people think they think they're good guys, and the people who protect them also think they're good guys. And again, this is something that you guys have been talking about, and I've been talking about off air and whatever for a couple of weeks, which is this idea that this show is trying to say something about like institutions like the police force, and again using vigilantes and superheroes in this case is kind of like a lens through that, but like that, and that's how she's seeing it, obviously. But there's a lot going on here, and that's just like that's just one of the most explicit lines towards that deeper meaning that they've been kind of hinting at. That like, just because you think you're on the right side doesn't necessarily mean you are. Reevaluate your perspective,
And it's a commentary on hero worship in general, which is something that the comic certainly was. The movie less so. The movie was more for a general audience. It's not a indictment of the movie in any sense, but it's just different. But the comic really was sort of shining a light on the people underneath the masks and their own psychological problems. And so I'm very happy to see that that's what we're doing in this show, especially with Laurie's character. Like I was mentioning earlier, like her hatred and love for heroes and for masks specifically. Right after the scene with the dildo, she invites that PD kid.
Yeah, she doesn't want to use that. She wants something real.
Yeah.
And then he even uses she makes him wear the mask.
Exactly. That's my point. So she forces him to wear the mask, which is something that she gets off on internally behind closed doors, but still wasn't enough. But in the real world, she does everything she can to like hunt down and exterminate masks, essentially. Like it's similar. It's not exactly the same thing as like, the hyper right-wing evangelical anti-gay person having latent homosexual tendencies, right?
It's almost, yes, it's very much like that.
Like you hate it and love it in different ways.
Well, it's more like you hate that part of yourself, so that you express it in the outward world as like attacking those things about yourself that you hate.
Exactly.
Right.
And then we get the final part of the joke where she goes back to the original joke she was setting up with the bricklayer, and God says, "What are you doing here?" Because he didn't notice her because she was standing behind the three heroes, and she says, "I was here the whole time," which is connects to her character from before, right? She's just always kind of behind the scenes, and you don't expect her when she comes up with something.
While she was a young adventurer, she was very much underfoot most of the time.
Yes.
And whatever, that could also be a commentary on gender roles at the time, but she was never the leader of the Watchmen. She was always being strung along by somebody else.
Right. And that's why I think this portrayal is so good, because it's the evolution of the Silk Spectre, who wasn't admired as much, as the other characters in the original book. And here, she's just such a dominant force and is aware
Right.
of all those things, and it's turned her into the comedian. And has this amazing, final joke, showcasing her history as the underdog and the unsuspecting one.
Mhm.
And when she brings up the brick again, and the last time we heard about it, it was thrown into the air. And then here, the punchline is that the brick comes down, lands on God's head, pushing his brains through his nose, killing him. And
Right.
The daughter, Laurie, I guess, is the last one.
So does that make any sense?
Well, I think yeah, because you got to remember who she's talking to, who the audience is. The subtext there is that she's probably the one that Manhattan would least consider a threat, the least suspected person. And then if there's somebody capable of killing a god, she believes that is her.
And then
And-
she caps it with roll-on snare drum, curtains,
Yeah.
good joke, which is what happens, which Rorschach says in his journal when he's mentioning the comedian.
It's the clown joke.
Yeah.
Pagliacci. Remember the joke?
No.
Come on.
Oh, come on.
No.
It's a man's
Well-
really depressed. He goes to see his doctor, says he feels alone in a bleak and inhospitable world.
Depressed.
He's depressed. He's whatever.
The
The doctor says, I have the cure for you. The great clown Pagliacci's in town. Go see him tonight. It'll pick you right up. And then man bursts into tears and he turns to the doctor and he says, "But doctor, I am Pagliacci." Great joke. Roll on snare drums, curtains.
Right. Okay. That's a sweet, and that final line is sweet in with that.
Yes.
Like not having read the book in a super long time,
Mhm.
that would be like if I had read it like yesterday, I'd be like, holy shit, that like I would have like I would have been like so.
And then in the comic, when that is
oh.
being said,
Yeah,
I'll just show you a picture of it. It shows the comedian being thrown
out
out
the window.
from the original murder.
Yeah,
And
so
then the curtains red, obviously, and then
right,
it's just pure blood.
because he's dead.
It's one of those great examples of how they interpose sort of the voiceover, or in comics it's just a text box over panels that aren't necessarily what's being described, but the text makes sense. And
right, which
applies.
is again what Jeremy was getting at with this, like the idea that like this episode is so much that in TV form, especially with the framing of the joke, because she's telling the joke and you're seeing other
Yep.
things happening,
100%.
right?
And a great example, a very minor example, but a great example of like one of the subtle ways that it does that is when she's telling the joke earlier in the episode about the hero going to hell.
Mhm.
At one point when it transitions, it cuts to the new scene, to the funeral.
Yeah.
And she says hero goes to hell, and it's panning
It's
down,
Crawford,
and the name of the cemetery is Tartarus Cemetery. And Tartarus is ancient Greek mythology version of hell.
Yeah, I think each three of the heroes of the joke is framed to specifically come up when it's being connected to what's happening currently.
So like, what do you think of this bullshit blue phone? Like his idea, like you pay to talk to Dr. Manhattan. That's the idea. Why would anyone do that? You would never get a response, right? So like, what the hell's the point?
Why do people pray in general? This is a god to
But
them.
that's why the end of the episode is the joke. She laughs because you could say that Dr.
Right.
Manhattan, you can say that, but
Mhm.
this car falls out of nowhere.
But that's
So it's alluding to, is it Dr. Manhattan? Did he hear? Or
we
is it
know
from-
that it's not.
Or is it from,
I don't think we know that. We assume it's not.
It's the same car. That's Angela's car.
Yeah. No, it's supposed to give you
Right.
that. You're supposed to decide for yourself
Right.
where this is actually coming from.
Well, all right, that's fair. I mean,
Yeah.
I think for me, it's fairly clear that it's Angela's car being dropped
Yeah,
by
it
that
can
thing.
be.
And
No,
in
no
fact,
answer is wrong, because why is it dropping now right in front of her
Yeah.
on purpose, right after the joke with the brick? Right.
well, why is the
Well, we can't
There's
go down a
lots-
bunch of
there's
why-
so
you
many
can't- you
questions.
can't-
There's
no,
so
no,
many
not go a bunch of
questions.
whys.
Yeah, but
That
like,
one- it's just that one specifically. That's why she's able to laugh at it.
yeah. All right, fair enough.
And like to assume that has nothing to do with Dr. Manhattan doesn't make any sense, because we know nothing about the people piloting that ship.
That's
We only know that
It's just
they
too
took
obvious.
Will away. That's
well,
it.
Will doesn't. I mean, Dr. Manhattan doesn't need to pilot a ship. That's the kind of the.
Yeah, but there's so many question marks at this point in this episode. While it did answer a few questions in terms of what happened to Laurie after the events of Watchmen,
Yeah. And Night Owl.
it created a hell of a lot, many more questions.
But it really connected Tulsa and the original Watchmen
Well,
characters
and
very
that
good.
was sorely needed. And going forward, it'll be interesting to see, because she's going to be a main feature of the show now, how she relates to everything we know from the first two episodes.
Mhm.
What did this is a question from an earlier episode, but like there's this like known fact that Dr. Manhattan can't pretend to be human. Why is that? Is that a thing from the comics? Or is this like that's just something they want to establish in this show to say like, don't just assume everyone's Dr. Manhattan. Like, please don't think that. Just to get ahead of people, or like what's the deal with that?
Yeah, I think they're kind of leaving it open to where who knows if he can't do that, right? Because they question that in that scene.
Yeah.
I think the idea there is historically he never has that we know of. But there's no logical reason to believe that he wouldn't be able to.
Which could lead to the theory of him entrapping Veidt on Mars,
right?
And creating
that whole universe.
Reality.
Yeah, they could all be versions of Manhattan.
Man, honestly, if he's not on Mars, I'm gonna be pissed off. Like it's like, otherwise, what the hell's going on there? You know?
You want to know
why not? He's
the
always
only thing
making
that's crazy about that, regardless of where he is, what's like really like cruel and gross about it is that he's making that leather out of it has to be the clones or else the bison.
No, it's the bison.
I don't know, man.
It's the bison, dude.
Yeah.
That's why he went and shot that other bison.
But he said thicker, so he had to choose a different animal.
Oh,
Like,
maybe. Yeah.
It looked like it was like human skin that he was working on, right?
Maybe. That's
but
not
it's
clear.
So true
but
to his character, right? Because even in the original graphic novel, there's all of his. There's always deaths
at
around.
the end of the episode 2, or not at the end, but at the end of the Veidt scene in episode 2, he says, "Bring him down to the cellar. We'll find a use for him." Referencing the body, the burnt up body. So like that's what I assumed it was.
And do you think that he's staging that play to mix it up with these real actions of the catapult and the suit to kind of make it look that he's just having fun or doing regular?
Well, no, because
things?
again, like Daniel mentioned, he knows that Dr. Manhattan isn't like that easily fooled by that. The whole thing that the way he was able to fool him last time was with tachyons, and there's no way he has access to that in an old English manner.
So
right?
What is the point of the play?
The point might just be pure for entertainment, man. He's a kind of he's a flair for theatrical.
He's theatrical, and also we learned in this episode that he's in captivity, so
he's kind of going insane, a little bit.
Yeah,
which is why he's not able to kind of come up with the solution right away, because he is the smartest man in the world. So it should be easier for him than.
But I think,
but the smartest man in the world can't solve gravity in a like that. You know, like there's certain intrinsical things in reality that are just like aren't just solvable within
or just like physical materials that you need. But I think what we'll find out,
set up to be able to transcend that.
And what we'll find out towards throughout the rest of the season is that this all has been for a purpose. I think he has a plan, and the pieces will come together later on. I at this point can't predict what that is.
But he shouldn't be aware of anything that's happening on like in Tulsa, right? Like there's no indication of that.
There's no indication.
So what would his plan be that is connected to the real threat that's happening?
Well,
with the 7th Cavalry,
you got to connect multiple dots, right? So you have the 7th Cavalry, you have Tulsa, right? Then you have Laurie Blake, then you have Dr. Manhattan, and then you have him. It's a chain, you know. I drew kind of a triangle, but it was a chain. It was supposed to be one line. I just wasn't looking.
Yeah, there's definitely connections. It's just isn't aware of any of that stuff, and they're all aware of each other and of him being potentially dead.
Right. So
he has less pieces to the puzzle, and he's just been in captivity.
He has no his presence in the world. If it found out he was alive tomorrow, to the people in Tulsa means nothing,
unless he could predict what would be the outcome after the events and what him going in hiding. If he could predict what would happen to society, and his plan is to change that if it's for the worse, right?
So
if it's going to result in more death.
Just to tie it back to not like the previous episodes, Veidt has to have some sort of connection to either the government or a larger conspiracy because of the squid rains.
Right? So
that has to come from him.
According to Pedopedia, there was a falling out, like in terms of his connection to politics after Redford was elected. There was some sweeping campaign funding reforms that created like a big kind of shunned Veidt a bit. So he had a falling out with the administration, which is the same administration that's still in power. So his involvement in politics has been extremely limited since that time.
So there's your answer, right? So I think the government has to be in on it then, on the hoax.
Oh, absolutely. They absolutely are. They took it. They saw the Rorschach journal come out. By the way, they know that Rorschach worked with these people. They're not oblivious to that. They saw that happened. They probably took it fairly straight from what Rorschach said, and just used it as like a false flag event. And they didn't even have to stage. It was already done that they could capitalize on, you know?
And the journal didn't include the ending.
Although Nixon didn't take advantage
when they went
of it.
to Antarctica, like any of that stuff.
No. They had everything up to that point.
But Nixon, I guess that's not really fair either, because Nixon would have been the one who would have had access to that knowledge and would have been able to use that for his benefit, but he didn't, right? So I don't know. There's too many question marks.
Yeah. It's unclear to me at this point how complicit the government is with the larger conspiracy. But
either way, like I love the episode. It flew by for me, like just flew by. The framing of it, I guess it was part of that because I was just so into what is she trying to say to Dr. Manhattan, and I just loved every little bit. Okay, this is about Night Owl now. This is about Ozymandias. Yeah. And then when we get to the second last one, I guess, or the last of the three heroes, I just thought it was so beautifully written how they handled Dr. Manhattan, what he would know, but still being sent to hell. And then knowing that Night Owl was in jail, Ozymandias is trapped in the estate, and Dr. Manhattan is on Mars. And now we're going to get some answers as to why, right? Or what they're up to, I think, coming up, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it was a great episode. Not like it wasn't my favorite of the three, but it was still a good episode of TV.
And just to go back to your point of maybe not being your favorite, I felt the same way for a little bit, to where when Laurie was kind of getting the upper hand with Angela, I was like, I'm more on Angela's side, right? Like, I think she's so badass and I want her to keep going. But I appreciated the history here and who Laurie is as a character, especially coming from those main events and her having the upper hand. And then I slowly just kind of shifted to, okay, they're both badass and they need to work together at some point. We just have to get through this part here where it's all Laurie for now.
Right. And that's fair. And I guess it's just a testament to how well they established Angela as a protagonist in the first two episodes.
Exactly.
So that's where that comes from.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Okay. Let's call it a day. I think that was a great episode again. I'm thinking about it differently now, having, talked about it. Follow us on Twitter at TowerBabbleCast, Facebook.com/TowerBabbleCast. Send any emails, questions, comments, concerns. If you have theories of your own, if we got something wrong, if we got something particularly right, let us know. TowerBabblePodcast@gmail.com. It's always fun, to do a little fan interaction. And then, we'll be back next week with another episode of the Watchmen breakdowns, and likely very soon with a regular Tower Babble episode. So stay tuned.
Oh, you got to mention the other thing. We can announce it here. The
Mandalorian.
Yeah. So we are launching another new spin-off show. And again, like if you are listening to this and you're on the main Tower Babble podcast feed, you're going to get it all. I mean, that's the best place to be. We encourage you to subscribe to them all because it really helps us. But if you go to towerbabble.ca, you're going to find links to everything. But we are launching Small Screen Star Wars. Small Screen Star Wars, where we'll be covering, starting with The Mandalorian. Right?
In like 2 weeks, not even.
Yeah. There's a new chapter in Star Wars begins with The Mandalorian. It's the first live action show in franchise history. And we're going to be recapping, we're going to be taking, all of the experience we have, recapping not just Watchmen, but Game of Thrones, Westworld, the years of podcasting stuff we've been doing. And we're going to take that to the galaxy far, far away, which is something we've always talked about. We spend a lot of time discussing, but never in a very dedicated fashion. So we're going to be talking about everything that's happening in Star Wars on the small screen, starting with The Mandalorian, recaps after every episode. Similar time frame and schedule as this show, and then after that, there's obviously Obi-Wan is following quickly on the heels of that. There's the Cassian Andor show, which who knows, that show might actually be really cool.
It will probably be Daniel's favorite.
You know what? Honestly, yeah, probably. We're talking about a spy show set in the everyone's favorite era, which is the original trilogy era, with a character that we've only ever really seen a little bit of, but written by the people who written and created by.
It can't be in the original trilogy.
Right. Well, it's that era. It's the Imperial era of Star Wars.
Right. So it's before Episode 4, but still okay.
Right. All right. So close enough. We're talking like months.
The technology just is always the same.
It's exactly no, but like we're talking like the Empire's around, the Stormtroopers, all that kind of stuff, and it's by the guys who made the Americans. So that's there's something to be said there.
Anyways,
Who knows?
That's down the road.
Like I said, we've let the doors open because it's called small screen Star Wars. There's lots to talk about, including some of the old animated stuff.
So you
Rebels.
think you're clever.
Well, I think I'm pretty clever. Yeah, I could have called it streaming Star Wars, but instead, small screen Star Wars, which I think doesn't create a great acronym. Like it's not like it's fine. It's just like a lot of alliteration basically, but that's fine. It's fine. All right. Anyway, yeah. Well, then you can. It's your show. You can close it out.
and we're gonna call it a day. We'll see you guys next week.